Well, hi, everybody. Glad you're here. This has been a new topic, a newish topic, I think, in this way for LSI and where this came from. I'll tell you more about me when we get to intros, but just to kind of tee up what we're doing here. I was here last year. I did a panel with the CEO of Reflection Medical, Todd Powell, and we talked about a culture change that I had done with him and his organization. And it was kind of like a LSI saying, well, will anyone come to this if they have other places to sit in the hall, and they did. And so the feedback was positive enough that we decided this year to expand it to sort of this broader question of, hey, as you're growing in size, what can you look at? And as your team gets bigger. And so I will tee it up in terms of group sizes, which Jeff and I were talking on the phone previously, and I picked the numbers based on what I know about how group work works. And he went, those are the same numbers I see based on how startups work. So I think we got some pretty good. So we're going to start off small and kind of step up and just talk about each of our experiences in terms of what that looks like. Mm-hmm. I think I'm going to ask you to hold questions till the end, because I normally in a panel I go, whatever we talk about is fine, but we're trying to actually make an arc here from small to big. So we'll try and make that arc and then leave some time at the end for discussion. And that'll be some questions we can do here in the room, and then we'll be here after as well. So that's kind of the plan. And so with that, I think I'll move into intros, and I'll just let each of us kind of talk through kind of what our background is and how we care to be here. So Susan, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. My name is Susan Insley, and I currently am not in your industry at all. I work for a company called NextNav. We IPO'd as a de-SPAC recently, last couple of years. We're about 100 people. Throughout my career, I've worked at different size companies, usually starting at the small, but then getting to the really big. And I'm here because of my HR experience, but I also kind of grew up in finance and internal audit. So I've seen a lot. So.
All right. Jeff.
Hi, everybody. Appreciate you coming. My name is Jeff Pompeo. I'm the president, CEO, and co-founder of a company in Charlottesville, Virginia called Caretaker Medical. We make a wireless wearable patient monitor that measures continuous beat-by-beat blood pressure, cardiac output, stroke volume, advanced hemodynamics and fluid response as a non-invasive alternative to invasive A-lines and PA catheters in high-risk patients across the full continuum of care. Data goes to the cloud and so forth and so on. We're commercial phase. 18 months ago, got our FDA clearance. Last year did sort of our soft launch, and this is the year we're hitting the gas pedal and really going direct sales to hospitals. I guess my timing could have been better with hospitals' budgets being tight and slashed in the environment we're in, but it's all about reducing costs, improving patient outcomes, and maybe most importantly, improving productivity for clinicians inside the hospital. So, background.
If you have a minute,
yeah. So I started in giant organizations. I'm an ex-GE guy, so I was with GE for many years. Running large businesses, and that was back in the Jack Welch era, where if those of you remember him, he was just maniacal about people. The company was the people, the products were second, and managing those people and driving the culture and stack ranking them, and constantly churning your bottom 10%. Those were core tenets. And to make a long story really short, so I left GE 21 years ago to do my first startup. This is my fifth startup. We've been lucky enough to monetize and exit the other four, 2 in medical devices, 2 in technologies. And I think, when Ed were talking, the interesting thing was that transition from running these giant, well-oiled, everything is a template organization to making it up in my basement with 2 other people was an incredible transition. And my wife says it's a disease that I have now, this entrepreneurship thing. I can never go back. It's funny. Our last company that we exited, I called it the indentured servitude year. When you get acquired, you have to work for a year I couldn't stand it. I mean, it was just nothing against the company, just the big corporate bureaucracy I learned is just not in my DNA. So it's the quick, nimble, make mistakes fast, back the truck up and try again that I really love.
I've got, that resonates for me. So, my background is big corp to small as well. So I did 10 years in tech. I worked for Intel. Intel's having a hard time right now. I worked for Intel and they're doing really well. And I was an engineer, and I got into kind of how systems work and how authority works and how decisions get made. And then 10 years after I started, I exited. I've been doing this for 20 years. And this is really working with companies. And now I work from Fortune 500 all the way down to a startup with 50 people, 20 people. It's the same work. What I'm doing is I'm saying we have 70 years of research and experience that says that if you work the way most companies work, you get what most companies get, which starts with meetings where you get together and everyone talks for 9 minutes each about how it's going. And the answer is mostly well. And then they run around and do a bunch of work so they can say mostly well next week. And so you get late, if any, warning that things are off track. And the top performing companies don't do that. They get together and they go, we're going this way and in the future. And right now it looks like we're headed here. So let's do this today to put that back together. And then we do that and it breaks something. And so we go do something to fix that. And so I call it iterate. My book out there is iterate. And the company claws its way through. And so I always say what I know is 2 things. What has to happen? I wrote that in the book. And how to get it to happen. And I do that by coming in and working for about a quarter with leadership to just run the company that way. Because if you just ask people to do it and you go, all you got to do is stick your neck out and say something's wrong, who wants to go first, right? And the answer is maybe they do. So we do it all at once, run the company, we speed up right away. And so that's kind of my background here. But I was resonating with what you said because I work Fortune 500 and I work startup. And I can work a Fortune 500 and they will say to me, we cannot believe the progress you made in a quarter and how much faster we are. And I smile and go, I'm glad you were happy. And I go home and go, oh. Because when I work in a 50 person or 100 person or a 300 person company, like we change what the company is, like, and it's different forever. I'm gone and it's different. So it's really, I think I'm unemployable now, like you, but it's really kind of fun to watch and same thing. You're the smaller company now, like you see it, like it's there. So anyway, let's start small. We're gonna move like from 5 to really big, and we're gonna start with 5 to 15. So 5 is everyone fits around a table. This was my bias in picking these numbers, right? They're just representative, but everyone fit around a table, and then we get to 15, which is like, we still fit around a table, but it's a big table and it's a little harder to have a conversation like we used to have. And also there's probably, at 5, the mission was probably like make a thing. And at 15, now there's probably something else, commercial, financial, there's more stuff coming in. So it's also more complex, right? So why don't you start us off, Jeff? What do you see at 5 and 15 that has to happen? How do you set up for the next phase in there?
It's interesting, back to that. When I left GE to go to this first startup, I was sort of the number 2 guy in the startup, and there were 6 of us. And I kept trying to institutionalize and templatize and formalize everything. And I'll go back to his name was also Ed, sort of my mentor at that time that taught me how to be an entrepreneur. Was you break all that, right? This is about, to your point, iteration. It's try, faster. So for us as that company, we grew that company from the 6 of us that started it to about 120 people. In about 2 years. And that was the classic late 90s, you could get funding on a PowerPoint, you get $20 million on a PowerPoint from Sand Hill Road and run with it. And so it was about spend as fast as you can so that you can, quickly raise another round with an up round. But the culture, we hired so fast. And so that culture we spent creating the company, for those first 5 or 6, or the 6 of us together, we all knew everything about everything. There was unequivocal trust. I mean, we vacationed together. I mean, it was like a family, right? Our kids knew each other. We had dinners together. And as we started adding people, there was a time where we were hiring 3 or 4 people a day. Especially out in the sales team and we had to learn how to delegate. We had to learn how to empower and trust, but have a feedback mechanism where you could quickly ascertain where that trust wasn't working or that trust was being taken advantage of so that you could clip it. And that got me back to my Jack Welch training is you can't be afraid to terminate someone fast and early when it's clearly not working.
It makes sense fast, which is not that hard to do at 15, but it's not that easy either. Yeah.
Oh yeah. One of those other core tenets was, you're going to spend 80% of your time trying to turn a C player into a B player when you should be spending 80% of your time on your A players.
Finding an A player.
And that's what we kept trying to judge. So that scale was fast and rapid, and it broke all our processes. I mean, we had to go from running a company with spreadsheets to buying a system and implementing a system. And I remember when we got to about 20 people, that's when we hired our first HR person,
right?
Which was a godsend because we were all trying to do HR on the side, if you will,
right?
While we were doing our real jobs, and it wasn't. Or that's fine at 5, 7, maybe even 10.
That's
people.
Over, yeah.
But then, yeah.
Yeah, no, that's great. I think, and I'm, by the way, I'm, as a side note here, I'm panelist and moderators. We decided we'd rotate who talks when, so I'm going to jump in here as we go along. But for me, somebody asked me today for a podcast interview, like, what can you do when you're 5? Because of course I have this whole book that's really about levels. And my first answer is right at 5. At 3, it doesn't work, but right at 5, start making decisions together in a way that is the way we know works to make decisions. And that is, we know who the decider is, and the decider listens to everything everybody knows. And then the decider says, here's what I'm deciding, and here's why. And then everybody does that thing. And I say that, it sounds very obvious, but it's very easy to tip into something like voting. It won't be called voting at 5. You won't say, let's take a poll. But people say things like, let's see how everybody is leaning. And anything that looks like voting, this is not a political comment, this is a group work and business comment. Anything that looks like voting in small group work produces irrational results. And the reason is, if we 3 work for the same boss, and the boss says twice in a row, let's see how you're leaning, we have a future together, and we have a history together, and we like each other or we don't. And so we are going to start trading votes. And so that person immediately is removed from information, because now I don't come in and go, here's what I know, and Jeff says, here he knows, and Susan says, here's what I know.
Yeah.
We say, we all agree, boss, do this, because I've horse traded for something else later. And so start small. Do that. As you move to 15, you can start to say, okay, now let's bring in a future look. Let's make sure we're continuing to look down the road, because at 5, you will automatically look forward. Yeah. At 15, you will start doing the status update dance. Here's what's going on today. So make sure you're not doing that. Do the what's coming in 6 months, what's coming in a year, what can we do today about the future? Because, and you can just say this if you're in the company, we cannot do anything today about what's done, right? So let's make a decision. Let's start now making decisions for the future. And if we have a 1-hour meeting and we're 23 minutes in and we haven't made a decision yet, let's fix that meeting so we stop doing that. If you catch that at 15, it'll save you a lot.
Yeah. I want to go back to something Jeff said about hiring. I think one of the things that's really important at this phase is really understanding who's on the team and what they can do. So making sure you understand who are your utility players and who are your experts. And then that's going to also come into play when you're talking about making decisions. Like, who do you know that you need to ask more questions to so that you're getting the best information out on the table and you can be the decider, or whoever is the decider. But you've got to think about that team as a portfolio of assets. And as you start to grow, you need to know where your gaps are and where you're going and what you're going to need in order to get there. So that having that inventory at the ready it's going to be super important.
And I think you can start that early and start to build it.
Start it early, so then as you're hiring, either going to 15 or 15 and beyond, you're filling in your portfolio, right?
Right, right. Yeah, I feel like both of us have had individual versions of this conversation where it's like, don't get the big bureaucratic template yet, but think ahead just a little, just a little bit of prep for that, which it's understandably hard to do.
But, And this is the time too to really solidify that trust. So both of you talked about trust. So I agree, it's not voting, but making sure that everybody has the opportunity to put information out on the table, and you're listening. Listening is a really key part of building
Don't
trust.
skip the listening, right?
Don't just go straight to, like, ask questions, be curious, listen to the answers, and then decide.
Yeah, for sure. And there is a thing there that I think actually is a good launch into our next size, which is, okay, so now we're going from 15 to 25, right? So now, and you kind of nudged into this a little bit, Jeff, in your conversation already, but like, from my perspective, 15, we could get around a table. 25, I mean, I guess we could find a table, but I can't hear that person anymore. So we're not only at a place where we can't do group work, we're also at a place now where, like, we can't even really have a conversation. All we can do is someone can give a presentation and people can go like this, right? Which is not actually decision making. So, same questions, what do we do? And I think that the thing that I would add to kind of key into what you guys just said is, I'll go first on this one, is I talked about already, look forward. Now you've basically started to say, hey, we have 25 people, so you guys go work and come back. And so now we get into look up, which is when I send someone off to do something, whether it's them by themselves or them with a group they're running, I need to make them understand, yeah, you have a goal, but we're not holding you accountable to your goal. We're holding you accountable to owning a piece of the higher level goal, right? So you can't succeed at your piece. This is not that hard to do at 25. This is exceedingly difficult to do at 100, because everyone goes, here's my status, boss, and it's looking good, right? So, but if you can get to this place, you go, no, we may change your goal at any time. We're all doing this together. We succeed or fail together. If you can start to plug that in at that 2025 space, that I think is the piece that helps you. Together with that is, we want bad news. I have stickers on my table that say, "We love reality." At 25, you have to start to say, "Bring me bad news. Bad news is good news," because that's the place where it also tips into, "Oh, my boss's boss wants to hear that it's going well. So let's make it look like it's going well." Like, no, my boss's boss wants to hear what's broken. We solve the biggest problem every week. And so you have to learn. My favorite thing to tell leaders is you practice saying this. The way you see me arranging my face is worry about what's coming up, but not about you personally. Thank you for bringing the problem. Please continue to bring problems, because otherwise they go, "Oh, he's mad. I'll never bring another problem." Right. So that's my thing for 25, 15 to 25. Let's start, Susan. How about you?
Yeah, I think just building on that, not taking any of that. This is the time where you're really starting to establish culture in your company. So you have trust with the small group around the table, and now you're going to expand the table. So you're not necessarily going to be connecting with everyone in the same way you were connecting with that smaller group a year previously or what have you. So your trust is going to come into play. You're going to start needing to put a little bit of structure in place so that communication and information still flows freely, that there's a place to bring the bad news, whether it's in a regular rhythm of one-on-ones or just people knowing that you have an open door so they can get to you with that bad news, or daily stand-ups. This is the time to start creating a little bit more clarity about how information is going to move.
Yeah. Right now we're approaching the 20 person. So we're living this now, and we've got a plaque in our conference room that says, "We attack ideas, not each other."
That's right.
Oh, I love that.
And every Monday morning we have a stand up, and the tenet of that whole stand up is, what are you afraid of? What are you worried about? We're looking for the bad news, because as you grow, to your point, the bad news starts to get masked, because now it's not a dozen people all, with the same shared vision. Now it's, 20, 30 people that now career aspirations come in, and promotions come in, and layers and all that starts to mask the truth that, as a CEO in particular, you got to know now, because as a small, perpetually underfunded company, you've got to see these problems coming, when they're small, because when they get big, it can be too late. Yeah. The last point I made, you mentioned utility players. I think that's another big inflection point. When you're in that kind of 5, 10, maybe 15, utility players are awesome, right? Yeah. I want all Derek Jeters, because they can play any position on the field. But then you get to 20, 25, now you got to start specializing. You can't, if you had all utility players, now you have to start using process instead of people to solve these scale problems. And you can't just keep plugging in more shortstops. You've got to have a first baseman that's great. And then you pepper in sort of the different profiles of the employees, right? How, it never stops to, I keep getting surprised over and over, which means I'm an idiot about this, but the way engineers, software, hardware engineers, and scientists think is polar opposite to the way commercial and salespeople think. Engineers and tech people. It's the thrill of the chase, right? It's you do some vision casting of the CEO. As the CEO, they're all in, and you're chasing that vision, and that's the goal, the satisfaction. I don't want to say salespeople are coin-operated machines, but to some degree, there's a little bit of that, right? And it's vision casting is not enough. There needs to be justification and answers and compensation programs that, are more financially motivated in the short term, as opposed to just accomplishing the vision. So being aware of that as you grow and scale, especially in medtech, because we all start basically with technical people first, then you grow to the commercial people. And you just got to understand they're wired differently. They need to be managed differently. They're motivated differently. Not every employee is the same.
Yeah. I just to add on to that, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, Ed, but I think that's a super important point. You're still at a size where you can make sure you have those individual connections and understand everyone's motivations, and making sure you have the incentives and systems in place to keep those people motivated as they become further away from you in the daily activities, right?
If you're right, you're at a size there where it takes a little more effort, but you still do it.
You can still do it.
Yeah. And that's a good tee up for, okay, now we're going to go from 25 to, and I wrote in my notes, 50 to 100 or more, which are really, really different. And also kind of the same. It's kind of like if I give a keynote and if I have 12 people or 20 people, I can tell. But if I have 300 or 500 people, like it's just me and bright lights and 2 rows. And it's like you lose that visibility, right? And I think that's what happens. Now your meetings are happening in parallel. Your mission and your issues are split into different pieces.
Yeah.
So if you're the leader, you've got things happening that you don't need to know about. To your point, we start with highly technical people that are generalists and good at everything.
Yeah.
And about 25, they can still run around and be in everything. And they look pretty haggard. Their hair doesn't look great, but they're in everything, right? And I've done many clients where I can point to the guy, it's usually the engineering manager, and go, that's the one, he's in all of it. But 75 people, that person that's not sustainable anymore. You can't pack them all in a room and have them go around and get updates. And so you've got to really start to figure out, what do you do about some 2 levels away from me, and like all of a sudden the important work is happening 2 levels away from me. So what does that mean? So who's trying to say?
Yeah, I'll take that one first. I think I'm the culture person. So this is a really great time to start getting very clear on what your values are as an organization. So you don't want a lot of structure, but you do want to know from everyone in the organization, like what are those kind of key tenets that everybody can operate off of and not have to be managed day to day. And so they know, like, our values are accountability or transparency, communication, whatever those are. And those are the things that they're going to use every day to guide their work, whether you're right next to them or not. So this is one of the things that I just did coming into NextNav. 100 people was really helped them, craft their identity, if you will, as a culture. So, having all the employees kind of give us, what are the top 5 things that you think that represent how we get work done. And then we did it kind of a tops down, bottoms up kind of exercise, and realized that, hey, like, of all the words that were submitted, it was very clear that these 5 words here are the ones that everybody's using to get their work done, to make decisions, to guide their behaviors. And it was very easy for us to say, this is who we are and this is how we operate.
Yeah. At that level, I think, when you're small, kind of sub that. When you start trying to stack rank employees and all that, it's pretty obvious in a small organization who's great and who's not so great. Everyone knows that. You don't have to formulate. You get to scale 50, 100 people, it becomes more ambiguous. Who's great?
What do you mean by great?
Yeah, what does great even mean?
And you don't see their work, so how do you know they're great?
Yeah, and we all try all the standard techniques, right? The skip level meetings, but to your point, Ed, skip level meetings, you don't always get authenticity in those conversations, right? It's career management kind of conversations. So you have to dig deep. And for me, it's asking, very specific questions. Let's go out into the factory floor. Tell me about this machine. Why this, why that, to try to dig into, to get past sort of the superficial fluff of, the boss is here. Let's put on a show.
Right.
You're not there for a show. You're there to understand the problems, right? It's all about solving these problems quickly. Yeah. And then, trying to maintain that culture. It's all about communication, right? If you don't, so, I think now that we have Zoom and all these tools that we didn't have a decade ago, it's much easier to have these all employee meetings and quick 30-minute bursts. So, you get FaceTime with everybody. Everyone feels like a cohesive group, even as 100. It's really tough to do without putting a whole bunch of layers in between, which is no good for anybody.
And the complexity of in-person versus remote as well. So we have so many people in the workforce today who prefer to be remote. So we were talking about that last night. Jeff, maybe you want to talk a little bit more about that, because I think it was really important.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one good thing that came out of COVID, I would say it was this forcing function of embracing remote work.
Yeah.
And it works as long as the culture embraces. If there's this undertone of we've got the in-office people and the out-office people, I think that tips over pretty quickly. I don't think it works.
The other thing that I've seen is it drives a level of discipline. So I'm like, as you hear me talk, I'm very much about how do we get together and make decisions. And one of the things I saw when companies jump into Zoom is it's like you can fix a lot of badness in your meetings in the hallway when you leave. So you can have a performative status, non-decision oriented meeting, and then everybody's walking out, they do the real work. On Zoom, they all hit the red button and no work happens, right? They do the performance and they go back to like being alone. So it does drive a level, I think, of discipline, both in how you approach it, like you're saying, and also then what do you do with the time you have together, because it's necessarily limited.
Yeah. And we use Slack. I mean, there's a lot of tools like that, but that has helped, I think, with those hallway water cooler discussions. You're just always, now our software guys in particular say that's a very disruptive tool. So we have sort of no Slack periods where, for 12 to 2, no Slack.
When you're not walking into my office. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, and I think you all are talking about the same stuff I always think about, which is, from my perspective, like I have mostly leaders who are really good leaders who mean well. Like the nature of what I do is let's be collaborative. So the ones that want to be dictators and really mean people, they walk away from me, which is a lovely side effect of my career. But having said that, I work with these people that are really good leaders, and I don't think they always realize they're scary. They're not scary personality-wise. They're not scary as people. But when you're my boss's boss or my boss's boss's boss, like there's reptile brain stuff going on there. And so if you go, great, let's have a skip level, what's going on? Like you didn't say only bring me good news, but they heard it. And so I think to your point, show me what's going on. I also think there's a very heavy modeling function. So I always tell my senior teams, like when it's a bigger company, like I want you to run your meeting like the way I'm talking about, like forward looking. I want you to solve issues. I want you to reinforce the importance of bringing bad news. Yeah. I also want you to get in the habit of when the issue's on the table and you can't solve it today and it doesn't need solution today, have a mechanism where you go, you have 2 weeks, go off, come back with recommendations. I'm putting it on the agenda now for 2 weeks, we'll ratify it. So that there's a mechanism, because the better you model that in the senior team, the more it's going to copy down. Every team on the way down is a bad photocopy. And so if you do those things loosely on the senior team, you're into a mess down there. But if you do it really well on the senior team, you'll get enough of it at the lower levels so that you have it happen, because you can't go down there and tell them to do it without seeming like now you're the mean boss again. And I think if you do that and get in the habit of showing them, hey, look, we listen, we act, we adjust. Right. No news is bad news, but bad news is good news. And no decision is final, but every decision is always implemented. I think that modeling at the top will flow down and make your culture too.
Yeah, the modeling thing is really key, good and bad. So everyone needs to be very conscientious. So if somebody does come and give you bad news, make sure it's not the person that you're getting ready to fire. Because as soon as you terminate that person, everyone's going to know I brought them bad news and they were the first out the door. So really, if you are going to be thinking about letting people go or making changes, I would be very conscientious about how you're communicating with that person, what they're bringing to you. How do you make sure that it isn't tied to something that they've put on the table?
Yeah. And I think establishing that accountability structure as you scale and grow is critically important. And to your point, it's modeled at the leadership, right? If you don't follow up on things, people get that, and then they
won't follow
up on things. So we have a formal we call it the FUP file. FUP, follow up. So there is a physical FUP file with all the follow-ups in it. I want to be very clear and enunciate that it's the FUP file. And that's become a cultural thing is, where's the FUP? Where's the FUP on that? It's,
there's some very block and tackle stuff I get into with senior people, and I never lead with this because they'll think he's a meetings guy and I'm not, but it's like agenda horizon, which is when you send the task force off to go come back with a recommendation, you put it on the agenda in 2 weeks now. That way it doesn't get forgotten about, FUP. Right? Like so-and-so said they'd do this. And then people ask me, well, how often should we review it? And I go, I don't know, review it some. And if people aren't doing stuff, review it more. If it's taking too much time, review it less. But have it, and oh, by the way, also have a plan for the meeting. We're going to talk about this issue and this issue so that you're not walking in going, what are we doing today? Because I've seen a lot of meetings where it's like, what are we going to talk about in staff today? You better find something. It's like, you should have a queue of issues to do. Yeah.
I have this vision of people walking around the hall going, what the FUP? What the FUP?
What's on the FUP? Slack me the FUP. It just goes right. So we're good. I wanted to give us about 10-ish minutes for Q&A, which we actually have. So any final thoughts before we jump into open Q&A? And if you have a question, please kind of head for the microphone so they can get it on the recording. Or I guess we can, they'll bring it to you or something. But any final thoughts?
Well, I think we've got a question right here.
You're on the story. Okay, let's do it.
So my question is about the application of this in the medtech context. So I've worked in 200,000 person companies. I currently lead a 5-person company. So I have seen lots of different models. But one of the things in how fundraising trends have changed is there's more and more of us here at this conference who are getting into later stages of quality controls, right? You're at a QMS level where you have to have SOPs and you have to have control processes. Meanwhile, your team is still in that 5 to 10 category. And so can you just speak a little bit to how you think about the culture that's being less structured and less formalized, while at the same time having product activity and operational activity that does have to be more structured and formalized? How do you balance those two in smaller teams?
I can take that. So that's a phenomenal question, right? How do you maintain this fail fast, entrepreneur, no bureaucracy in an environment, in a regulated FDA regulated environment where you have to have a QMS platform? You know, I've done a number of these startups, so I make a different mistake in every one. 2 startups ago, the mistake, we didn't take QMS seriously. I mean, we had a 3-ring binder with paper SOPs that we downloaded from the internet, and no one ever opened the book. That was a huge mistake, because when it came time for our audit, you know, guess what happened? So now we know we take QMS seriously. It's a semi-automated process. We still take shortcuts, but we take them purposely, knowing we've got to go back and clean it up, and we treat them as experiments. So the shortcut around this SOP, or we're not putting, you know, this is going to happen outside the QMS system as an experiment on benchtop or whatever. Then we'll go back and sort of do it again, fast track under the QMS rules and get it documented. So
that makes sense with the product side. I'm actually asking a question the other way around. So as the company gets more and more controlled, how do you still keep a lot of the benefits of only a 5 to 10 person team having that much more informal communication and kind of without the QMS B&B production level product consideration?
I can maybe talk to that a little bit and tell me if I'm getting it or not. But what I've seen in my clients, and this is from MedTech and elsewhere as well, is V&V and product development lifecycle and QMS stuff. All of that often gets confused with how we run the company. That's not how we run the company. That's an output that we carry. And so I had one client in MedTech who we did this intervention thing that I do. We put the iterate methodology in place. And on the QMS side, they're very clear to delineate. Like, how we run meetings is not QMS. QMS is, we decide in these meetings how to implement this thing. And so we've activated for want of a better term, the group intelligence of the organization to keep clawing forward. And one of the outputs we carry is to have compliance, and is to have, you know, whatever we need in those ways. And we pay attention to the right thing. So we notice, is our PLC, you know, serving us anymore? Not because, you know, just like your filing system when you were in your 20s to now, it's like, it was great until I got my second job and it was like, oh, that's not working anymore. I need 3 folders now. Now I need 100 levels, right? So, but as long as we task the human intelligence with keeping that up, instead of getting confused and saying, oh, we use that as a way to regulate everything we do, that's what I've seen to work. Is that closer to what you're asking?
Yeah, I've seen this kind of tension. So thank you.
Susan, you used the word, but I think in a different context, transparency.
Yes.
And I've been part of 4 startups now, and one of which was bought in the middle of .com into this massive company. In all the earlier ones, and I was a co-founder in one of them, transparency was, we shared everything with everybody about the state of the company. The P&L on a quarterly basis, you know, things that are going well, things are going bad. And that's different than just being open communication, right, about getting your work done. So what's your all thoughts on that? Because when we hit the big .com company, they're like, you can't tell all the employees that. We're you know, that's inappropriate that you're talking about that in meetings. And people started quitting because it's too ambiguous where we work and we don't know what's going on.
Interesting. I think, you know, as a public company, there are things that you can't share and until you're in certain windows, and in some cases there are things that just stay at the top and can't go down. But I think it's really about what you think people need to know in order to really be invested in their work, right? So what helps them stay attached to the company? What builds trust with you and the other leaders? So are you sharing, you ask them to share bad news, are you sharing bad news with them too? So are you providing that level of vulnerability to create the trust that keeps the information flowing? So that's really the objective, if you will, of transparency. It doesn't necessarily mean everybody needs to know all the worst news that's going on, but enough to know that you care about their level of commitment to the company, so much so that you're going to bring them in. It's building inclusive culture, right?
There's an active decision there about what can we not share, what must we share,
That's
and
right.
what's in the gray area. And I think that, better decision making at the top helps with that. I've seen a version of that too, where I do my thing, and at some point, and this has happened with most startup CEOs, they look at me and they go, I'm going to know a lot more about kind of what's happening and what's in trouble now. And I go, yeah. And they go, should I tell the board? And I go, I don't know. I mean, yes, sometimes. And so they all come to their own kind of peaceful place of like, what's an onstage conversation and what's a backstage conversation? Because these are forecasts, right? So, like what makes you more predictable to the board? And it's a version of the same question, which is what do I have to tell them? What should I never tell them? And then what's gray area and what's the benefit? So it's a conscious decision, I think, more than one answer.
Yeah.
Yeah. One cautionary tale. I mean, it's a bit situational too. Know who you're speaking to. I mean, if you're too transparent, you just terrify people.
Yeah.
Especially as a negative EBITDA company, that's trying to, you're going to run out of money at some time. That terrifies people, right? Is it 12 months? Is it 18 months? Oh my gosh, do I need to look? There's no right job.
You don't need to keep reminding them of that. You need them to be focused on doing their work.
Right. Yeah. So there is some limit to, just know your audience, I guess, is the message.
Yeah.
So we are currently living in the remote world where we see very good things happening also, like sometimes a few positions works out very well with the remote and few not, in my opinion. Like to hear your thoughts. You throw a bit. How is the future going to look like, especially having the culture of remote, scaling up, having the remote positions, especially in the medtech, if you can.
90 seconds, future remote, go.
You have to embrace it. It's here to stay, and you're not going to get the best and brightest people if you mandate in the office. Generally, there are certainly exceptions. So you have to embrace it.
And you have to be intentional to make it successful in your company. You can't just let it happen. As we have already mentioned, you've got to have communication mechanisms. You've got to have that trust in there so everybody's showing up at meetings. You've got to have a way to have hallway conversations, if you will, outside of meetings. So it does take a little bit of effort in it, but Jeff's right. It's not going away. So embrace it.
Last thing I can add to that is I have various clients with different remote approaches. And if you have some people remote and some people in a room, invest in the software that puts cameras in the room so they can see who's talking. So it's not like a little square with 9 little heads, because that makes it a lot better. It's almost like the same experience.
Yeah.
We are out of time. Thank you for being here. We'll hang for a bit for discussion afterwards. I'll head down to my table where I have books. Come and get one. They're heavy, and I don't want to take them home.
And free.
And free. Thank you. Heavy and free. That's the sales pitch. But thanks for being here. Thanks for attending, and please stick around and chat with us after.
Yeah.
We're all done.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.